Last week, we replaced the lower control arm bushings on my LR3, and we found my inner tie rod boot and tie rod are completely worn. So today, we're going to replace those. Okay, welcome back again. Today we're doing the inner tie rod on my 07 Landrover LR3 or Discovery 3 for those of you everywhere else except North America. This is a pretty simple job, pretty much the same on any vehicle, and you can do it at home with very basic tools. You don't need anything special. So I figured I'd run through how to do it quickly. You do need to get the vehicle aligned afterwards, but you can probably save yourself a few bucks at least and do the labor yourself. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why we need to replace the bellows on this side. But you can't just visually tell if you need to replace that inner tie rod. So that needs to be actually physically checked. Normally I would do this with the wheel on, but because this one is so bad, I can show you with the wheel off. Simply grab your wheel, front and back, and shake it back and forth. You can see and hear the amount of play in there. So that's why we're going to be replacing that tie rod today. First thing we're going to want to do is break the jam nut loose for the outer tie rod end. On this particular one, it's a 24 millimeter, and I'm just going to knock it down like so. Once it's loose, we can remove our inner splash pan here. It's basically 4 little plastic clips, and then we'll have access to the bellows and the inner tie rod itself. These things can be a real nuisance if the Phillips strips out, but you can just pull them out and then push the center piece out once you have it up. With the inner splash guard out of the way, we've got nice access to our inner bellows and tie rod end here. The inner section of the bellows is held in with a large zip tie, and the outer section with a clip. Confirm that your new kit comes with the clip and comes with a new zip tie. Otherwise, you might need to reuse that old clip and source out a new zip tie. Because our kit comes with a new one, I'm just going to cut the old one off. With the boot slipped back, we have access to the inside of the tie rod end. That's what it should look like. It'll have 2 flats on it that you can get a wrench on. Now if you have an open end wrench or even an adjustable wrench that's large enough to fit that, that is the tool to use. Unfortunately, I've loaned mine to somebody and I can't remember who. So if you're watching this and you have my wrench, I'd love to have it back. We're gonna make do with this. Not the right tool, not the ideal tool, but it'll do the job. I've broken it loose, but I'm not going to take it right off yet, because now we're going to remove the outer tie rod end just to make work a little bit easier. Now, if you're planning to reuse the outer tie rod end, and we will be on this one because it's not worn, obviously you want to try and save it. So thread your nut back on to protect the threads, and then all you need to remove it is a hammer. And you're going to strike the knuckle right about here a couple times. Depending on the tie rod, you can count the turns that come off, but if your new tie rod isn't identical to the old one, it'll get you in the ballpark, but it's not going to get you exact. Obviously, you still need to take it for an alignment after. "23. And now we can remove the rest of the inner tie rod. A lot of vehicles will have a metal retainer here that basically, once you put the tie rod end in, you'll bend the tabs over the flats. And that's to lock this in place and prevent it from working itself loose over time. The Land Rover doesn't have that, so we're just gonna use a little bit of Loctite on the threads just to make sure that it can't come loose anytime in the future. Not all tie rod end kits come with this, but this particular one has, which is kind of nice. There's a little bit of grease to apply to the tie rod itself, and it prevents the boot from binding up while you're rotating this. We'll put a little bit on the inside of the boot as well. you don't need to do this part, but your alignment guy will thank you. Now we can install the lock nut or the jam nut. Now this is why I don't move the jam nut very far when I loosen off the jam nut on the original part, because this way I can roughly line it up, and that's going to give me a pretty good indication of where the outer tie rod should end up. Again, that will vary depending on the tie rod end. If the thread's a little bit longer or shorter, it will throw it out a bit, but that's for the alignment to sort it out in the end. So now we'll just do a quick once over, make sure that we've tightened everything up. Just confirm, we know we've tightened the inside one up, it's been Loctited. We've got both of our clips on, our jam nuts in place, and we've Loctited and tightened up our outer tie rod end. So knowing that that's all good, we can go ahead, reinstall our splash pan. All that's left now is throw the wheel back on, do a visual inspection of our toe setting, and then we can tighten up our jam nut. Before anybody yells at me for using an impact gun, it's a torque stick. It won't let me over torque it. Okay, we got our wheel back on, our tie rod's in, but the jam nut's not tightened yet. What we're gonna do now is a quick visual inspection of the toe. Now, this is by no means accurate whatsoever, but the idea behind it is simply so we don't burn off our tires on the way down to the alignment shop. First thing we need to do is lower the vehicle back down on its wheels. Because it's on my lift, I don't have turn plates. We're gonna have some binding here, and we're in a smaller garage. So I don't have room to even roll this vehicle back and forth on the lift. I'm completely maxed out here. So this is gonna get us close, but when we throw it on the alignment rack, it's still gonna be way out to lunch. So with the vehicle backed on 4 wheels, we're going to use the driver's side as a reference point because we haven't actually messed around with that, so we know it should be fairly close to the original factory setting. So what we've done, we've lined it up. So if you look down the side, you really can't see the back wheel, whether you're looking from the outside or from the inside. That way we know that we're pretty close to square. However, if we come over to the side that we replaced the tie rod on, and if you recall, we did count how many turns it came off and we lined it up to the jam nut, so in theory it would be right? Well, like I said, if that tie rod isn't identical, it's going to be well out. So have a look here. If we look from the outside, we can't see that rear wheel at all. If we look from the inside, look at how much of the rear wheel we can see. So that's telling us that this wheel is towed in. So we need to adjust the tie rod to move the front of the wheel out to try to bring it into square. It doesn't take much adjustment in here to make a lot of adjustment on the wheel, so we're only going to go about half a turn at a time and then have a look. We still got quite a ways to go. We'll go a few more turns. The other thing to keep in mind is we don't have a steering wheel holder in there, so even though we're making adjustments on the passenger side wheel, the driver's side is likely going to be moving as well, so we actually need to go back and forth just to double check each side. So I'm going to go 1/2 more, and we're going to have a quick look down the wheels again. So we're getting pretty close on this side. We're still towed in a little bit, but like I said, both sides tend to move if you don't have a steering wheel holder in there. So we can see that on this side here, we've also moved. So I'm just going to shake the steering wheel a little bit to try and eliminate some of that tension. All right, so we're looking pretty good now. It's not perfect, but again, this is just a really quick visual alignment just so we can get down to the shop without having to buy new tires by the time we get down there. We could do it with a couple of bars and some tape measure, get it a little bit more accurate, but we'll save that for another episode. This time, that's good enough. We're going to tighten down that jam nut. And then that's it for this job. We'll take it down to the alignment shop and all the suspension should be done on this truck. So, till next time, go out in the garage and have a good one.